Hi everyone, this is a screencast on subcultural strain theories. This is linked to the functionalist theories that we discussed this week in class. The reason why it's going to be done in the form of a video PowerPoint is because we don't have enough time in the 2 hours to really develop our ideas of functionalism and also include the subcultural strain theory stuff as well. So it needs to be done kind of additionally, so it's like 1.5 kind of lessons on this. It's linked very much to the work, as I said, from previous week of Durkheim and Merton on functionalism. What we're going to learn then from this PowerPoint and the work that you're going to be doing in addition is what the subcultural strain ideology is, who the main theorists are and what they believe in. We're going to also look at, does the theory offer any alternative perspectives to why deviance occurs? And hopefully finally we're going to answer the question, does everyone deviate in the same subculture? Okay, so what do they believe then? Okay, the subcultural strain theorists believe that deviance is a result of different values from the mainstream. Okay, so thinking about this whole like a consensus value that we have, it's a deviance away from that, and that is through our inability to achieve the goals through legitimate means. So we look at illegitimate means of getting there. Alternative structure to those denied, in that, you know, if we are denied those goals and we can't achieve them illegitimately, as mentioned, we will look at illegitimate means and we will fall within a subculture because we aren't part of the mainstream. It actually kind of criticises and builds on Merton's theory that we discussed, the functionalist theory. So it's kind of a bit of a mishmash of, you know, pros and cons of that. Albert K. Cohen is one of the theorists, and he looks at the status frustration. Agrees with Merton to the sense in that deviance is largely a lower class kind of problem. However, it criticises Merton's in that it's much more of a deviance committed by a group rather than an individual. So Merton's really sees deviance as being something that's committed by an individual, or it's an individual act. Cohen sees it more as kind of a group thing. So, you know, you've got groups of lads committing deviant acts, etc. Also, Merton focuses very much on utilitarian deviance, in that it's crime committed to gain something material. So it's a theft or a fraud, so we're getting money or we're getting actual material items. And Cohen believes that Merton ignores this non-materialistic type of crime. So what about crimes such as violence or vandalism, which is just done as a kick out at the mainstream? Cohen focuses very much on studies with working class boys, and these face anomie, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on, what I want you to do from what we discussed in class. But this anomie is from middle class dominated education. So as you would have discussed last year in education and sociology, you know, schools set up to be a middle class kind of society, and it benefits middle class people. Those from a working class or lower class background are going to have difficulty in that because of cultural deprivation, and also the skills that they need to achieve in actually being good at school. This results in being at the bottom of the official status hierarchy. So, you know, those who aren't that clever and they don't have the cultural background and they don't have the material particles are going to be at the bottom of society. This leads to, as I mentioned, Cohen saying the status frustration, and that's what Cohen's saying though is the status frustration, that we have the status of being at the bottom and being really low, and it's an inability to actually adapt to being that low and at the bottom, and that's why we kind of deviate from the norm. States that we reject mainstream middle class values and we find a subculture. So we actually look at what the middle class actually values, so that's like status and wealth and family and things like that. And what the boys tended to do would be form or join a delinquent subculture, something that shares the same values and they're in the same situation. So you would never find someone from a middle class background who's successful and has these values, middle class values, joining a delinquent subculture. According to Cohen, we have this alternative status hierarchy, okay, and Cohen sees these subcultures as being a hostile reaction to the outside, and the reason why we kick out is being in spite or malice or contempt to the outside. So the reason we do it isn't necessarily because we can't get the money, we can't get the things, but it's kind of it's kicking out at those mainstream ideas and kind of turn them upside down as well. So if you think about deviant behaviour, normally in middle class backgrounds we would actually be condemned for it. So society would condemn you for being bad, or for property vandalism and things like that. Where if you join a group, think about when you're at school and the boys join this group and they do things that are probably against the norm to kind of show off, so these deviant subcultures actually think it's quite cool and you gain a status, and that's one of the reasons why we do it. So we're finding an alternative status hierarchy. So it's about who can be baddest gets to the top. So if we're going to assess Cohen, the strengths, especially compared to the other kind of theories that we've come across with Merton, is that it offers a non-utilitarian explanation, in that not all crime is actually for gain. So violence and vandalism, sometimes it's not about gaining those goals and values because we can't get them legitimately. However, criticisms obviously is this assumption that working class and middle class boys actually start with the same values. What if you never actually had the goals? So if you are born a working class child, you might not actually have these goals in the first place of having success and all these things. So if you're not trying to get those goals, then you're not failing. So it doesn't really account for why working class kids necessarily go into a subculture if they never had those same values in the first place. Okay, the next theorists we're going to look at really are Cloward and Olin. Okay, Richard Cloward and Lloyd Olin, and they kind of again build on Merton a bit, and they agree that working class are denied an opportunity, and that these deviant acts are very much a working class youth phenomenon. Okay, and it's because they're denied this opportunity to achieve money success legitimately, and they respond to the situation by acting in a deviant way. However, what they look at is that not everyone actually responds in the same way, so you can't kind of pigeonhole everyone. So they theorize that there's different types of subculture. We're going to go over those in a moment. But why do people not actually all go into the same type of subculture? Well, the reason for that is you can be unsuccessful in gaining your goals legitimately, and you could also theoretically fail in finding them illegitimately. You might be a really bad criminal, so you still don't actually gain those goals. So these are the three types. We have criminal subculture, and that is basically kind of based on where you live and whether or not you come from a background in an area or in a neighborhood which is actually crime-ridden. So you kind of fall into an apprenticeship of utilitarian crime, so you actually start learning from other people how to commit crime, and this kind of stabilizes a local criminal culture as well, and you have a hierarchy, so you have those who are at the top of the gangs, drug pushers or whatever, and then it kind of rolls down and you kind of work your way up. So if anyone's seen like The Wire or things like that, it's a bit like that, I suppose. You just work your way up from the bottom. Next is the conflict subculture, and this is more in places where there's a high population, and we're starting to talk about like gang culture here. So you've got a high population area, and it results in highly disorganized crime because not everyone agrees on the reasons why they've failed. Not everyone agrees on the values as well. The bigger the population, the more variation you're going to have. This is probably the closest to Cohen's theory, but yeah, it shows that there is alternatives, so there's not just one type. So if you imagine gangs vying for the same type of turf, it leads to violence and infighting. So moving again from the utilitarian crime into non-utilitarian crime, which is looking at not necessarily financial gains, but maybe notoriety or status. Final one that Cloward and Olin look at is the retreatist subculture. So what happens if you're actually a really bad criminal You're going to retreat from culture altogether, not just from the mainstream, but also from this deviant subculture. You're going to fall into this retreatist one, where you kind of just give up on life and you maybe turn to drugs or alcohol. Obviously, this is very much not always the case, okay? So it can be very individualistic, but a lot of the time you will kind of retreat. You'll just become a recluse. You won't get involved in any kind of culture. So if we're going to actually assess Cloward and Olin, we're going to look at, obviously, most crimes are actually working class. However, it ignores the crimes of the wealthy, okay? So what about the, are they saying that just all crime is working class? It totally ignores any kind of middle class or upper class crime. So fraud, for instance. It does offer an explanation for the different types of deviance and also the resultant subculture. So it recognises that not everyone falls into just one bracket. But even with that, how do you define which one you actually go into? So it's difficult to actually say whether or not you fall into the middle ground, which would be conflict subcultures or criminal, because if you think about the mafia could be disorganized because it's such a big thing, or again the analogy with the Wire, it could be such a big thing, but you also do fall into this like a criminal subculture where you work your way up the top. It's very much a reactive theory, so it's in reaction to this deviant behavior. Does everyone share the same goal at the start? Possibly not, Walter B. Miller argues that lower class have their own values and they're not based on success. So thinking about, not everyone starts with the same goal. So if you're born in a lower class family, you might have a different types of goal to that of a middle class. And also Miller basically says deviance arises from underachievement of own goals, not the mainstream. And he calls this focal concerns. Going to do a little bit of homework on that today. Okay, so more recent strain theories. We've got this institutional enemy theory, okay? Mesner and Rosenfeld come up with this idea, and that it's an obsession with individual wealth and this winning mentality. And it definitely comes from the American dream ideology, where you will do everything you can, no matter what, and you will deviate from your norms, and it kind of becomes like a winner takes all. I'll do anything to actually get it, and it comes from a pressure to achieve these results. And it comes, that's what turns it basically into a crime, and it's encouraged. Education plays a major role. Within schools, there's a big focus on making you employable and making sure that you have the skills to actually achieve these goals. It's not about values. They don't teach you about values anymore. And then there's been several things, Downs and Hanson and Savelsberg look at this free market and lack of welfare equals higher crime. So the first one is that the more welfare, so the more money spent on welfare, the lower the imprisonment rate. And this was done on a study on 18 countries. And Savelsberg also looks at post-communist Eastern Europe. So once communism fell in Eastern Europe in 1989, then it actually saw a rapid rise in crime after that. Okay, so what now? Sorry how quick I've gone through this, but I want to try and keep these videos as short as possible. You're going to have to do a little bit of work now based on the theory I've just given you and some additional theory. So there is what you need to do. So I want you to answer the questions on the Google form link, which is below this video on the blog. Need to be submitted by Monday. I want you to create a revision aid, so it can be a mind map or a table or anything like that, and it needs to be on functionalist and subculture theories. Think about the bottom end, the requirements for solo. Is it relational? So have you related functionalist and subculture? Have you compared, contrasted? I want you to research Walter B. Miller's focal concerns, and there's 6 of them, and I want you to find or theorize an example for each of them. And then I want you to watch the video on anomie, okay? What we're saying is anomie is normlessness. However, there is a professor in America who totally disagrees with this and has done a translation of Durkheim's work, and at no point does he say normlessness. I want you to look at this. It's only about a 3-minute video. This will go against what I've said and also what the book says. The web book is kind of wrong in that aspect. So that's what I need you to do. There will also be some other links on work that you want to do, and that will all be on the blog. Hope this hasn't been too rushed. Enjoy. Bye bye.